Well, today on Spotlight Now, we catch up with Mayor Rick Blangiardi. There are a number of issues impacting the city, and we're going to get the mayor's thoughts.
We are 2 days out from the State of the City address. He's also unveiled his budget, and we'll get his thoughts on the tragedy in Manoa. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday for Spotlight Now. Joining us now live in the studio is Mayor Rick Blangiardi. Thanks, Mayor, for joining us.
Ryan, good to see you, and Yunji again. Nice to see you.
We want to start off, of course, there's a number of issues that we want to talk about, but we want to start off with what's happened in Manoa over the weekend and just get your general thoughts as the mayor about what you felt like when you heard this news.
Well, you know, whether it's mayor or just being a human and having been a father of 3 myself, it's beyond words. It's so vile. It is so vile and violent and so tragic. It's really. I know that there has not been disclosed as to why. People have speculated about that. I'm sure that people are going to try to find out what happened, whether that gets reported publicly or not, I don't know. But it was one of those incidents when you learn about it, you almost wanted to turn away from it because it was just so violent and so unbelievable. And so I don't have any words other than just tremendous sorrow and sadness to think that something like that could happen. I mean, anywhere, but the fact that it happened in Manoa on a Sunday, it's just not anything you would even think could happen. So tragic, very sad. I do want to commend, and I talked to Chief Logan this morning, the HPD officers that had to deal with that, who walked in on the scene, including AAMS services. I mean, that just must have been something just horrific to deal with in the line of duty. And so congratulations to them. I understand that the police work that was done on the scene and everything else from first responders was done quite well. So hats off to them and on something that I think almost anybody you talk to would have the same reaction. It's really hard to believe, and it's just so sad.
Yeah, it is so traumatic for our community because we are so close and there are all these connections just because Hawaii is so tied together, you know, and to what you said about us trying to sort of wrap our heads around it and understand why. We know that because it does involve a suicide, the police don't necessarily have to disclose a motive as they would in a typical homicide. Can you tell us a little bit about the conversations you're having behind the scenes in terms of what ought to be released to the public so that we can try to understand what happened?
Well, you know, I've been a big proponent of having our police department be more transparent, but on this one, as with suicides, as you just said, there's a sensitivity and a confidentiality. And look, I would just say this: we've not had that much in the way of behind the scenes at this point. We'll probably have some discussions because right now I think they're gathering a lot of information. But to the act itself, with respect to a motive, there can't be any motive that would even be remotely imaginable that would justify that and what happened and the way it happened. So, you know, whatever comes out, whenever it does, and whatever gets said to the public, or it will not justify what happened. It's that beyond the realm of anything that should be in our lives at any level for anybody. It's just unbelievable.
This was a domestic case, sounds like, and when you look though overall at the conversation of public safety, there have been a few high-profile events that has really rattled the community. We've seen the acid attack that happened at Ala Moana Center, the shooting that happened just before Christmas at Bank of Hawaii, where a mother was killed, and a number of other incidents that have really alarmed the community. What are your thoughts about just where we're at with public safety, be it an isolated incident, a domestic instance, like we've seen, but to the general public, some may feel like this is something that's happening far too often.
Well, look, let's be candid here. I'm not saying this defensively. Private domestic event like that is separate from what happened to that poor young lady who had the acid thrown on her, or the woman that was shot. I mean, look, there's a lot of things we're not happy about. There's no question. But we're working really hard to try to improve our police department. There's some things I'm going to be announcing this week towards that to help with having more police officers present. We've been a bit behind from a procurement standpoint, which is the only reason, which makes me crazy. I kind of blew up at a Chinatown neighborhood board meeting the other night out of personal frustration at the 45 cameras that we've paid for that we're waiting to arrive that should be in and hopefully be installed to complement the 7 we already put in the Chinatown, and that's in the urban core. But across the board, I mean, we're aware of the smash and grabs happening elsewhere around the island, in the incidents that are happening of violence. You know, the world we're living in right now doesn't make it feel like it's safe, or should be. It could be a lot safer. And to the extent we can get more police officers patrolling, we will. To the extent we could put security cameras, we will. But at the end of the day, you just can't have somebody there all the time. And we all have to be more aware than ever before. It's inexplicable. I always have a hard time with that word. It's hard to explain. But there's a reality there. But it's not just here in Hawaii, and that's not meant to be an excuse. I sit there and just look at the stuff that's happened and happens. And in this role of mayor, you feel like, you know, you can't do enough. What's the answer? How do we prevent that? And, you know, and anybody I talk to says, you know, there's only so far you can take that. It's really about decency of people in the world that we live in right now.
You know, and building on that, I do want to get to your budget and the state of the city and all the other issues that you're facing. But before we leave this topic, you know, the incidents that Ryan just laid out, when you think about these incredibly violent acts, these are acts perpetuated by men against women.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that tells you about the mental health of men in our community, if there's more that we need to be doing to reach out in some way, not to excuse away anything that's happened, but you know, these are violent acts perpetuated by men against women.
Yeah, as I sit here in this studio that I spent many years in, and I think about all the public service announcements that we ran and all the stories that we did and everything, and we were really big on the just say no thing and everything that we could possibly do over all the years to try to better educate, and the countless groups, so long before I ever became mayor, countless groups people we met with from the Domestic Violence Action Center all the way through, you know, and the groups we spoke to about it, Yunji, it's very sad. If there was something that you could actually do beyond just acknowledging the fact that what you said is so sadly true, it's men against women and the incredible violence that takes place, we would do it. But I don't know if there's an answer for it. You know, there's a lot of mental health issues, there's rage issues. I don't know what gets triggered by drug taking or depression or the economic pressures that people feel and they snap and break. It's just, the world is a stressful place. I would tell you that you try to do everything you can from a public awareness standpoint to educate people, and it almost felt like we were running into a wall time and time again. You know, we dedicated millions of dollars over years of airtime free just to better educate the public to try to prevent it, and saw minimal results, quite honestly. And that's not just our effort. It was so many other efforts. You see it everywhere. It's just an indictment right now on the bad actors who don't seem to have any boundaries. I wish I could say something more positive about that.
Well, as we continue on in this conversation, we want to, of course, encourage all of you watching at home that you can answer or ask your questions for the mayor by entering them in the Facebook section, comment section of our page at Hawaii News Now, or you can also scan this QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen. Mayor, we are just a few days away from your State of the City address that you will be giving. Any insights into what we can expect to hear from you? Any highlights or some key priorities that you're really hoping to lay out in your address?
Well, you know, knowing that I was going to come on the show today, and having worked on this speech now quite a bit and facing an afternoon of tightening it up and probably rehearsals tomorrow, practicing, understanding the seminal moment, if you will, that we're in and what the state of the city represents at this point in time, both in part as a celebration of the work of our team, but more importantly on the road ahead, just sort of what we're talking about on things that we can't control versus what we just discussed and what I hate to say I feel rendered impotent, but some of the stuff you almost can't control. And so when we talk about that, but there's a lot in our control. That was the responsibility we took on. So yeah, we've submitted our budgets. I was in front of council yesterday. Our budgets now, this is really our third budget. We just began our fourth year, but when we first came into office, we had 60 days to balance a budget that the prior administration had done, and it was predicated on the 21 fiscal, which admittedly and understandably was cut dramatically because of COVID. We came in the middle of COVID. And so, well, quite honestly, the first 18 months in office, living through the first 6 months of the existing budget, and then the very next year, the one that we had, 18 months, we had no financial direction, if you will, with respect to our priorities. So this is really our third budget that we've done in beginning our fourth year. And the monies that we put into the budget are now reflective of our priorities and what we want to get done and what we are doing. So in that regard, I can tell you that's exactly what the State of the City will be about. It's going to be focused on our priorities and the solutions that we're working on. And I can easily rattle those top 5 off.
Well,
but I think you know them really well.
Let's get into some of those. I mean, the last State of the City, what struck out to me, I remember you talking about these wicked problems,
Yeah.
and that was really the sort of focus of your speech, laying out a lot of the challenges before us and how you were going to tackle them. Let's start with hiring was something that you just referenced a minute ago.
Okay, let me just back it up a little bit. Okay, so last year we talked about we introduced the concept of wicked problems, and we really went to some length to describe how we were going to approach solving those problems, those intractable problems that have plagued not just our municipality, but unique to Hawaii, yes, but quite honestly, in the greater context, the kinds of problems that plague all municipalities. We're not unique and alone on homelessness. We're not unique and alone on affordable housing or the need to have that. I just read an article today about out-migration from the Boston Globe. In Boston, 1 out of 4 young people between 20 and 30 are planning on leaving the city for the same things that you hear here. They can't find jobs that pay enough, the cost of housing, et cetera, right? I mean, that stuff is happening everywhere. But we, this year, are going to talk about the things that we're doing to drive execution, the solutions that we're putting in place. And I'd like to kind of hold some of that before, and don't take any thunder away from Thursday night, but we've gone to work on all of them. So if I were to tell you, in a job right now where I don't want to double talk, but you have to deal with multiple priorities. If there's one overarching priority, it's public safety. But clearly, housing, affordable housing, building affordable housing, and what the city's role in that is going to be, what we're doing with DPP, which is vitally linked, our efforts in homelessness and what we're doing now and will be doing in the future. And the staffing issue, which you've already talked about, along with public safety, are 5 very big, important priorities that impact and touch everybody's life here. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. There's a few other little things. We had to cut the speech down to 50 minutes, a little bit less. And it's amazing how much is said. I'm hoping that when people hear us, they're going to, because as I said, we're going to focus on the things that we're already doing and the solutions and what we're proposing across the board. In many cases, unprecedented things. That's all part of where we are at this point in time. We're going to run for re-election. I would tell you that, without being presumptuous, 5 years from now, or 5 years on my last day walking out, I know I'm going to feel like no matter how much we've done, and we intend to get a lot done, there still was not enough time to get everything done that we wanted. And you live with that, and you say, okay, so therefore all the more on where you can make the impact, the greatest impact. And that's what we're interested in doing, is creating impact unlike anything that anyone has seen before, even believes is possible, if you can take that on.
I do want to kind of address the vacancies and the hiring need for in the city and county, because as we've talked about in the past, this is not something new that's to your administration. It is something that the city has had to really try to battle over time. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on how you feel like you've done in these past 3 years, because you have implemented some things already to try to help some of those problems, yet we know that there's still a need. How do you continue to
and not only just that, Ryan, I think if we're going to talk in that context, you got to remember COVID, the impact of COVID and what it's done to a job force, not just here in Hawaii, but everywhere. So that just made it even more challenging. But having done the deep dive in the diagnostics on the systemic operations of our human resources department and looking at all the dysfunction there, looking at ways we could streamline, looking at things we could outreach. Look, I've said this over and over again. An organization of 10,000 people, in any organization, needs to be doing three things fundamentally really well. And quite honestly, to our dismay, and I'm not here to denigrate anybody, but as you said, it's been a decades-old problem. None of the three that I'm about to say to you were really in place. You've got to be recruiting all the time because you're facing attrition in a normal workforce of that size, plus people retiring. So recruiting, what was the city doing to actually and actively recruit? The second thing you have to do is, especially in today's workforce for retention, you have to train and develop people and give them promotional opportunities and have that also correspond with financial incentives as well in order to do that. There's very little money spent in training and towards retention. And the third thing, and probably the thing that really jumped at me, is the lack of succession planning. So void of just systemically talking about trying to fill vacancies, not having an aggressive recruiting program, not spending the proper amount of money to develop and retain people and help them with promotions, and for that matter, to negotiate, which we're currently doing. I don't want to get too far into this because I'm not going to tell you with the HGA and what we're doing to improve salaries and the things that we put in the budget. And then the last thing, the succession planning is really, really important. If I've been saddened by anything and concerned over the last few years in office, is meeting these wonderful people who come in, many times a lot younger than me, saying, well, I just did my 30 years and I'm leaving because I told myself I was going to. You could just see that they, and they know so much and they're so good. And, they walks out the door and there really hasn't been a lot of planning for these people leaving, how to deal with that. And so you end up in a large organization that maybe whoever's there, they can raise their hand, they want to do that job, and then they get into these positions, and have they been formally trained for it? Was it that, when you talk about succession planning, that also brings into the development and that tutoring, that mentoring and what you need and how to do a job. And so you see that in some glaring cases of people. I'm going to talk proudly about the 10,000 people who work at the city and county because I get inspired by them. And we're doing a lot of things right now that have not been done before to understand that level of the workforce, which I'm going to talk about on Thursday night. But the truth of the matter is you have people in jobs who don't know how to do those jobs in decision-making roles. That backs up. And I think the fundamental reason probably this has happened is that I came out of a private sector where you had to work to develop a profit, and if you didn't develop a profit, you were gone. No matter what they said, no matter how glowing the rhetoric was about our purpose. I'm saying this now as a broadcaster. If you didn't send the money, you're out. So you had accountability at every level of an organization to help with that effort. In a city operation, an enterprise of 10,000 people, it's not about driving profits. Everything is funded from an outside revenue source. So you have all this human activity lacking a direction and an accountability that you would find in other places, which just compounds itself. Not the least of which is that, they were hiring people in the past, but they were losing more than they were hiring. And so over a period of time, that really just manifests itself, and there was no incentive. And the other thing that they were doing is budgeting for those positions and then reallocating the money to take away from the incentive of really hiring, and we've stopped all of that. And I'm telling you more than I want to tell you right now, the two of you, but I knew that. But I want to be able to talk about that because we've really done a good analysis on that. We're really doing some really different things. And quite honestly, again, we've now got the foundation, and for the last 2 years, I'm going to report this Thursday night. We're actually, for the first time, last year was the first time, the second time it's even better than last year, ahead on the positive, but we still have big openings.
And one of those big openings is at HPD, and we know we've had Chief Logan on this program,
Right.
and he has doubled his effort, tripled his effort.
Yep.
But you have the same issues there, and really it just seems like they're treading water when it comes to
Well, we're
hiring.
going to do some very specific things. I'm going to announce it Thursday night. Things that have not been
I
done
think
before.
that's all we're going to get.
That's what you're going to get from me. No, because I even debated coming on. And I love you too. You provide a vital service. But I thought, we've worked really hard on this, on the things we're doing, not so much for the speech itself, But that speech, as I said a few moments ago, is a seminal moment. It's a responsibility for a mayor to report to the people who live here. And as I've already disclosed, we're going to report on the progress we've made, the solutions, and not in glittering generalities. I want to hold off on that specificity, if you don't mind, until Thursday night.
Well, let's talk about homelessness then. Not to jump the gun there, but let's talk specifically on what you think is working and what is not. One of the things that you came in with was this CORE program. That was a revolutionary idea that has
That was part of it.
Part of
Okay.
it. But let's talk specifically about CORE, if you think that's working, and what other areas you think that you're having some successes.
Well,
in
here we go
homelessness.
again on my whole conversation about what we're going to talk about in the state of the city, because homelessness is a big issue. So, look, we knew when we came in that in order to have the kind of impact against the circumstance, the fact that even though our number is somewhat scalable when you look at sheltered, unsheltered in terms of thousands, we still are in the top 5 on a per capita basis in U.S. cities. And it's in everybody's face. It's not just in one place. It's become pervasive. It's become dangerous. We've had incidents happen, which we've already alluded to, that scare people. So when we looked at this problem, we said, okay, who's doing it well? Where do we see some examples? Because some places are doing pretty well. We looked at the cities that were getting the most notoriety. Denver was one. Houston was another. Boston, as I've already mentioned earlier, Eugene, Oregon. And so we looked at this thing needing 3 parts, okay? 2 of which we could possibly develop, 1 of which we couldn't. First one was to have a mobile crisis unit, because we knew, and I knew from my days here at Broadcast when we did No Room in Paradise, an award-winning documentary, and we had the CFO from Queens talking about they were losing $500 million a year just in the emergency room losses of what was happening, and the fact that there was more than 1 million 911 calls, 700,000+ of them were for either some kind of social work call or homeless, and repeated homeless calls, and EMS being deployed and HPD being deployed only to get to a scene, and then they're being asked to, at best EMS would pick them up, take them to Queens, they'd clean them up, maybe treat their wounds if they had any open wounds, feed them, shower them, or whatever, put them back out on the street. That was not working on any level. There were some good programs. The Mayor Caldwell started the Honolulu program. There was a good form of triage at helping identify people and placing them. But that even in and of itself was only in its early beginning. So we looked at that. We said we need a mobile crisis unit, first of all, to mitigate the drain on EMS, which we already have limited resources to begin with, and HPD on what we could do and a place to be able to pick people up. The second thing we needed to do, which has taken us a couple of years to really set up, is we needed places to take those people. We needed facilities that we could either perform triage, which is basically be able to work with them and place them into permanent housing solutions, or other kinds of things, but we needed facilities. So we thought we could come up with both of those, either in city-owned facilities or things that we would adapt and acquire. What was missing, the X factor in this, was the healthcare workers. That army of people that really can provide the treatment, because that's what you need. And there's a lot that's taken place with that. I'm going to announce all of that on Thursday night. It's happening. That's as far as I'm going to go. But it's a very solution-oriented approach. The governor's done some great things. I'm going to give him some good acknowledgments on that, on what we're doing. And I feel very confident we're about to make another big step. And we're working closely with people like Laura Theo and the Partners in Care, and Connie Mitchell, and Greg Payton from Mental Health Kokua, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, Catholic Charities. We have got all of these people in a place right now working with us in an unprecedented way. And so my expectation for results, in what is a scalable problem, but not easily solved, is that we can take a big bite out of our homeless population on a going forward basis, and we will, and people can expect to see that.
I do also want to ask you about just the relationship with the state and just the overall dynamics that's happening there. We've had John
Well,
Mizuno as well as Sam Moku on this
Yeah.
program talking
How did they
about,
do, in your
you know,
opinion?
there was a little bit of a bromance between the two of
Yeah,
them.
that's why we put Sam over there.
yeah.
Actually, honestly, because he and John go way back. Sam has the heart. I know he has the heart, and we need to have a point person in the city under Anton Krucky. Actually, right now out of DCS, because all they do at federal housing vouchers or whatever, is still my go-to point guy because that's who he was before. But putting Sam in there as a coordinator to work with John, important. I don't know if we're going to say anything good about Governor Green. Did he say anything good about me? Because I don't think he did. If he didn't, then why should I do that?
No,
Look, the relationship with the state, Ryan, to be serious,
Yep.
is really good. I am going to talk about that because that's an important dynamic. And it's been said to me now by a number of people that they really appreciate that. The very fact that we are working on a combined basis in not only the homeless issue, but some other issues as well, in order to combine resources, because one of the things that we realized, well, we didn't have all the resources. You got to remember, and he really hit me in the face getting sworn in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't really quite ever understand it before, but where the state has its Department of Health and the county does not, especially in a pandemic, a lot of things happen as a result of that. And there's a lot of resource the state has because they have the Department of Health that the city just doesn't. But working in a collaborative way, we share those resources. And that's what we're proposing, that's what we're doing.
You know, you mentioned that you came in during COVID and you inherited a number of problems. One of the other things you inherited was Skyline. You know, and your administration has had to handle that operating budget now, invest a lot of money in something that not a lot of people are taking advantage of. How are you feeling about ridership and where the rail system is at this point?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just address the operating efficiency of rail and how things on that end are going. And that right now is going exactly as planned and as hoped. The decision to provide interim operations was done somewhere around 2016 on whatever would be the first phase. And that wasn't of our doing, that just happened. And so when we got to Aloha Save, all this was predetermined that if we ever got there, and we did, that they would begin interim operations with a contract read with Hitachi. And so I looked at that, and then since that time, you know, we all know about the demise of Aloha Stadium. Not that it would only be for football games, but it's sitting there as a giant, big monument to yesterday. It's not exactly, you know, a destination. I know the swap meets on the weekend. But it's not conducive enough because we don't even have, because it was designed to be a multimodal facility, we don't really have the efficiency coming out of there with the buses, albeit they may be waiting, that we want to have. It's not enough of an incentive right now, and we know that. We know that. That is just what you can get out of it right now. If time is of the factor, and the people who are riding it appreciate this, is that it's 22 minutes from Kapolei to Aloha Stadium. Then you get on a bus, it is whatever time. That is good on some level because it's predictable, but it's not good enough. The next phase kicks it into, from a ridership standpoint, something very different, which is, you know, Hickam Pearl Harbor and the Pearl Harbor Gate and the airport. And we'll be there by the end of 25. It's a year and a half, a little bit more than that away. I'd like it to be sooner, but that's where it looks like it's going to be. We're doing 11 miles right now. The trains are running perfectly, and will continue to run well. I mean, it is really efficient. It's the only system of its kind in the United States. It's autonomous. I was with Peter Buttigieg, you know, a few weeks ago, and he was marveling at that. And because it's above the traffic, you know, they arrive within 10 seconds, I think, the timing on it could not be any more efficient. It's not attractive enough now to really build ridership. The ridership will change when we start to get through those two big employment centers, and obviously, ultimately, when we get past downtown by the end of this decade, early of next. And so that's the part. But what else is happening is the operating is going well, and the construction is going well, and we have the FTA back at the table as a construction partner with us, and they're now financing us. So it's a complicated deal. I'm the fourth mayor to touch it. I'm proud of the fact that we got things turned around. We got it operational. We're going down the Dillingham corridor. The FTA has come back. They bought into our plans. I think the the first phase of the 18.75 miles that we have outlined, which will service the 3 big employment centers, ultimately, is going to be highly effective. I would say this, and I've said it over and over again, we're not really building this for today. And that's the thing you got to get your head around. This is a transformative project that is really for tomorrow, and not just in the transit phase. I'm going to talk at length about housing, TOD housing, Thursday night, okay? Because this may be, when it's all said and done, this goes way beyond my lifetime. I'm not going to say yours, you're a young woman. But this may very well be, at the end of the day, as it's proven to be in other places, in innovative transportation stuff like this, if you will, more of a housing play than a transit play, and not just in building houses, but in developing communities.
Well, we got more with Mayor Rick Blangiardi here live in studio right after this. Stay with us, Spotlight Now. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back here to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We are joined once again by Mayor Rick Blangiardi. Thanks so much for joining us, Mayor. Tending to some mayoral duties as we speak, it seems.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. We appreciate you being on. We want to continue on in this conversation. It is the legislative session right now. We're talking about some of the issues pertaining to the city, but as the legislature goes, there are a number of things that get presented that ultimately will impact the counties as well. I want to get your thoughts about just this talk of a potentially legalization of marijuana. The police chief has come out and said that he does not. This is not something that the city, HPD would advocate for. The prosecutor as well has spoken out against this. Your thoughts as the legislature continues to navigate this issue?
Well, I've been also right there in arms with Prosecutor Steve Arm and Chief Logan, a number of community leaders, medical professionals, et cetera, and saying that we're not in favor of legalization of marijuana. Now, look, I've had everybody tell me, you can take this position and maybe it won't pass this year. It's inevitable. My understanding is I think right now 34 states have legalized medical marijuana, and 24 states, it may be 38 states legalized marijuana, and 24 states have legalized recreational marijuana. I'm not an old prude. I'm an open-minded guy, and since I'm 77 years old, I can tell you I was in college during the 60s when grass and everything else and hippies and all this stuff came into vogue, and that's when it really all started, okay? And so I've known a lot of people over my course of time, and in a lot of situations. For me, right now, I don't feel like lowering the bar. We opened up this show today trying to explain what's happening out there in the way of domestic violence, the ongoing, the incessant, the never that. And I'm not putting all of that on the use of marijuana, but there are things right now in our society that are more dangerous today than they've ever been. We already have a high teen suicide rate here. We already have vaping that's out of control, that's a gateway to smoking, which we know is not good in so many cases because of the nicotine addiction, and so on and so forth. I just don't want to lower the bar any further, and I'm not an old prude, okay? I just don't want to do that. I actually, in this television station, editorialized when marijuana got legalized for medicinal purposes to have dispensaries, because I thought that that was ill-conceived concept to legalize it but not have places where people could buy it other than the black market. But I'm not going to lower the bar on the recreational marijuana. I've looked and I've been in these cities where they've legalized it, including my friends in Boston, who said, oh yeah, it's all good here. I don't like it. In fact, some of these major West Coast cities, they have lost populations of people, and half of them are stoned half the time. And I'm not just making that up. There's bad enough people are out there that suffer from mental addiction, mental illness in some forms of addiction. I don't want to compound it. And the stuff that people will say, well, if we legalize it, we won't do it. But the grasses out there today is getting laced with fentanyl and stuff like that, and all kinds of toxins. It's not only highly addictive, it's killing people. This is not anything I want to sign off right now. I wouldn't want to do it, and I'm not going to do it. So that's where we're at. We're as strong in our advocacy against it as anybody. And the last thing we needed to do it in areas where we have already low motivation. I talked to the pastors on the west side. I've already gone out there a few times. It's a very scary proposition. People need hope, not dope, to quote one of my favorite pastors. That's what they need.
And building on that, there's a number of comments. This issue always gets people, riled up, if you will, and saying that, look, this is green gold. This could really help the economy. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a lot of ways to make money. That's not one of them. We don't need to do that. No. Anyway, why don't you ask me about my budget?
Well, let's talk about your budget then. Your budget includes a $220 million increase over the prior year. Why do you feel that you need to increase it that much?
Well, your supposition is that I needed to increase it.
Well,
okay?
you're the one at the end of the day signing the check,
yeah, but
right?
let me put you in my place here, okay? We looked at the budget. As you know, our capital plan came down some $400 million, okay? But that can be that can be yearly on certain projects and whatever we're dealing, plus half of that spent on consent decree. But this year it came down. So our overall budget between our operating is actually down by a couple $100 million, but our operating went up a couple $100 million. Well, in the first place, collective bargaining alone was $90 million of that, beyond any control we had. The second thing is the hazard pay that we've allocated. That's a little bit more than $80 million. And the third thing was equipment that we desperately needed across the board. It was about $30 million. So right there, you have over $200 million just in those three things. That this wasn't about anything that I wanted to do. This is absolutely core to the operating of the city. And because those collective bargaining agreements were done under Governor Ige a couple of years ago. City and County of Honolulu was the only voice that dissented between the other counties We didn't, but it didn't matter because all he needed was 5 votes. I got reminded of that the day that I got elected mayor, that's the way it works. Because the multiplier effect here in Oahu is significant. And so because of our numbers and stuff. So between collective bargaining going up, our hazard pay of $80+ million at this point right now, and $30 million for equipment, very little else went up.
When you're crafting this budget and you're looking for obviously the prioritization of the various departments and some of the things that are the priorities that you mentioned, also have to take into account what council members want to do and their vision.
Yes.
How much of a conversation and role do they play in that, the dynamics of forming this budget, and how often are you speaking about them, about their priorities, and where do they kind of stack up when you're having to make these decisions?
Well, it's all woven in together, and we've had an excellent relationship with the council. I was in there yesterday to thank them for that. It's been highly collaborative. I hope that you've seen that. One of the things that we promised ourselves, Mike Formby and myself, from a leadership standpoint, is we weren't going to have any public drama. There's no drama. We have some interesting conversations behind closed doors, but no public drama. We try to be very supportive of their priorities and try to put people on the same page. And so we're sensitive to that. We're sensitive to that. But when you're dealing on the macro level of talking about housing and homelessness, and we've talked about systemically the city's public safety, our first responders, the staffing levels that we're dealing with, are fixing DPP, that impacts all of them too, right? There's because of the respective communities. So the other stuff, we just look to see what it is we can get done in the respective counties. And so one of the things that we can do through the Affordable Housing Fund, the investments we're making in our initiatives, which I'm going to talk about on Thursday night on housing, is to make sure that that manifests itself, not just in a couple of districts, but in all 9 districts. And that's one of the things that we're working with them on.
You know, a big part of public safety is also fire safety. The last
Yeah.
time you were on here, you talked about a large campaign that you were planning to do, and also just some action to take to make neighborhoods safer. Where are you on fire prevention? You know, we're wet season now, it's raining, but dry season is coming.
I know dry season's coming, and we haven't, you know, I was very impressed at what happened at the Miliulani wildfires with HFD. You know, that was all done through the air, and it really required a cooperation with state and the military. So we had at one point, I think it was 7 or 8 between Black Hawk helicopters. I'm trying to think of the name of the other helicopters, escaping me for a second. And they were dropping lots of water. And, you know, that fire lasted for 40 days. You know, after it was out and not a threat and it was contained, they had to go back in with special teams because the root structures are still, you know, burning and smoldering and whatever. They did a really good job on that. And there's some other things we're going to be announcing with HFD. I think, you know, look, we're living in a time right now where we're seeing wildfires out of control almost everywhere around the world, but certainly in our own country. The Texas wildfires recently were almost hard to believe. You know, I see these scenes of cattle trying to run for their lives and not making it, and I think 1 million acres burned. Fires are a real threat in today's world and climate. I could not be more impressed than I am with the readiness of our fire department and the leadership they have and the men and women that are there. And we're making some investment in equipment for them. I'll be announcing that Thursday night. There's some other things we're doing to help. Look, at the end of the day, I think as we get into it, we'll try to do as best education we can. Since I was here last, since you brought it up, I mean, you talk about the futility sometimes in this job, but we went on the air basically begging people before New Year's not to light off fireworks, aerials. So we said, we understand carports and firecrackers or whatever, please don't do that. And we said it as strongly as we could, with the police chief there, the fire chief there, other people, and I tell you, I sat there in disbelief New Year's Eve and watched what went on. So I'm not trying to be naive here, but we need the public to help us when it comes to the prevention of not being careless, understanding almost anything that you can imagine could trigger a spark, and in the wrong area could create a fire. And look, we're also living right in our own backyard with what happened in Maui, and that should be an education for all of us. So this is just an ongoing effort. You know, I sit there sometimes and you say, what is it you need to do? You know, we opened up today, again, the show talking about domestic violence and its incessant nature, it seems. no matter what gets said. And the same thing on messaging about this. We just keep at it. You just keep at it. The good news is there's a lot of good people who pay attention, and it's just when the bad stuff happens, it really just sort of blows up in your face. That's one of the real challenges in this job here is you need people to help you. I was at the Chinatown Neighborhood Board the other night meeting. I told them, I said, look, I'm going to tell you guys the same thing. We're doing everything we can to help, but you guys have to do something too to take control of your own neighborhood. It's the same speeches I've made in Nanakuli and Waianae and Mililani and Pearl City, and they have really good neighborhood watch groups out there. And there's one in Chinatown. We need that kind of proactive from people. It can't be just government that has to do it all. We don't have the resource. You can't do it all. There's a reality there.
What do you do with that frustration? Because I can feel it is palpable, and it makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like me yelling at my kids. At some point, clean up your room. At some point, take control of your neighborhood. What do you do?
We just keep on it. You just keep messaging it every opportunity we have. We're about to do 11 town halls. Well, actually, we're going to probably do 13 this year with our whole cabinet. And that will be one of our themes, reminding people. We all have to share this and take. There shouldn't be the attitude. I think it's a misunderstanding. They think government's going to do it all. We need people to help. Right now, it's going to take us a while, despite what some of the efforts we're going to make to improve our recruiting efforts in HPD. It's still going to take a while to build that force up. It just is, and we can't put a cop on every corner next to something or a security camera on every. People need to own their responsibility in this, and somehow, some way, some people sometimes forget that.
Another issue that you've had to navigate through and manage is what's happened, of course, at Red Hill. Wanted to get an update from you on that matter, as those cleanup efforts are coming to an end here, and the future.
They already have.
Yeah, the future of what happens to this facility continue to go on, and its usage, and there continue to be maybe those who are concerned that someday this could be used in another way. Ultimately, what do you think happens to that property and that?
Well, that's just, it's just conjecture on my part, Ryan, because in all honesty, at the highest level of the military, and certainly I think with Governor Green, or at the state level, there are people trying to decide the future of Red Hill, whether the tanks come out, whether they stay there, they get repurposed. I still think back, for all that we're talking about, our frustration on basic messaging today, and marvel at the fact that those 20 tanks were built in the early 1940s without anywhere near the technology that exists today during a wartime situation. And each one of those tanks is as large as the Statue of Liberty. I mean, that is a phenomenal piece of construction. So I don't know if you just throw it out. I know that Admiral Wade, and I got the correspondence last week, they successfully drained 107.4 million gallons, or I forget the exact number, something like that. They're all drained, right down to the sludge, everything's out. What happens going forward, I don't know. It seems like if there's a way to repurpose it for some kind of non-fuel, that if there's a functionality there, it would just seem, that'd be like taking this incredible bridge and say, we don't need the Golden Gate Bridge anymore. Let's just take it. This thing was a wonder of incredible workmanship. Forget the mishaps for a second, just that. So hopefully something good will come from it. And if it gets decided then it'll be decided that that's what happens.
I want to go back to your town halls and what those exchanges are like for you, because I would imagine that people come with a litany of their wicked problems as well.
Yeah, they do.
And what I remember in the last one that you reported back, that really people want just basic functions, right?
Yeah.
No potholes and better parks. What do you
Parks came up. That was the eye-opening thing. Actually, I'm going to talk about that Thursday night too, because we're doing a lot.
We got to move our show to Friday, just so that we can talk to the mayor the day after.
I even told my communications director, our former colleague, still my colleague, Scott Humber, really, because I don't want to tap dance around. What I love when I come on the show with you is a chance to say things that are newsworthy or to be open.
Keep saying them.
But I actually, look. One of the things I'm proud of is, first of all, the cabinet comes. It's either a director or a deputy, in some cases both, and they all found it, and they all showed up all the time. We didn't have any problems with attendance, and that in and of itself, at the beginning of every one of them, when they each get up and introduce themselves, everybody says, wow, we have the expertise in the room. So it's a great resource to have readily available for people to step up to the microphone. Secondly, we don't filter. We don't filter this. We don't say, submit your questions, we'll go through and we'll answer what we want to answer. It's an open mic. We give them 2 hours and we say, have at it. I found that it really wasn't a negative experience at all. It was a chance for a lot of people to come up and just, talk about their needs, wants, aspirations, concerns, but it was done in a very positive way and they knew we were listening. And we did a lot from that. So we're going to do it again. I called it a journey of learning last year for our team. I think it sensitized everybody to get out of their own bubble and just get a cross-section of real life. So, maybe you've been living in Niu Valley, but guess what? You're in Wailua tonight, and this is how people in Wailua feel. And, it's not the same as what you're hearing in Niu Valley. And it was very educational for us, and it also helped us understand and shape our priorities and where we can have the greatest good and make the greatest impact. And again, it's also designed for us to try to win back some trust in local city government. We know that that's still an issue. And it's being in an elected office and the Washington narrative being as divisive as it is and what people hear and stuff, the only way I think we can possibly win back is through our actions and our deeds and our collective achievements. That is my mantra to our team. And that's why Thursday night, when we have the State of the City, we're going to talk about, we're really working on solutions. We're really working on creating impact. We're really working on tackling the tough problems and producing unprecedented results. Because this community deserves that, and that's what we signed up to do, and that's why I'm proud of this team. Is we decided to take on the tough stuff.
Well, I do want to maybe reverse and go a little bit back to Skyline and just expand a little bit more on something
Have you
that
ridden
you
on
talked
it?
about.
Have you been on it?
I actually have not yet.
See,
I live in
so,
town.
See, I love to ask that question.
I
to go
have.
there.
You have?
Just once, though.
Okay, just once. Okay.
But
Just
someone
to
who
see,
has.
Well, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable.
No,
but,
not at
but
all.
you
I
make
admit
me
it.
uncomfortable, so I can't
Okay,
just say,
well, I'm
no,
glad
I'm
we
just
can go
kidding.
that same way.
I'm just kidding.
Someone who has taken Skyline is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who
Yep.
was in town for that. I
Yes.
wonder if you can expand more on the conversations that you had with him, with the integration, of course, of him being there, but just being able to experience and the role of this federal government and the Department of Transportation and the future that they play
Sure.
in this project.
Well, I had the opportunity to actually ride it with him and Senator Schatz, and I try to stay a little bit in the background there because the senator but I spent a lot of time. In fact, I had subsequent to that, I had lunch with Mayor Buttigieg in the sense that all of us mayors were there, but they sat me right across from him. So I think he was very impressed at what he saw because first of all, it's first of its kind in the country. So somebody called it the world's largest robot. I don't know if that's correct, but it's autonomous driving. But it does speak to the future. He saw not only the existing route that we only went from Leawood to Aloha Stadium, but the whole mapping of it. But I think what he was really impressed with was when we got inside the rail operating center out there by Waipahu High School, which is our brain, the hub. It's pretty sophisticated. It's very sophisticated, and the people that were there and what they could monitor. And I think he saw also the stations were really smartly designed. Look, I've been in a lot of trains in a lot of places. You don't have stations like we have right now as far as the gates and the auto, all that stuff. It's definitely a futuristic project, and I think anytime you can step into the present and feel the future in a case like this, it's a pretty cool thing.
We know that you're planning for the future, and we're going to talk a little bit about your political future now. When you took this job, you had sort of laid out from the beginning that this was always an 8-year undertaking for you. Tell us a little bit about your reelection plans. At this point, there is no, others have pulled papers, but there's no meaningful challenger at this point. So what are you thinking that this is going to look like?
Well, I'm just focused on me, and we've now announced, we did it last month, February 12th. It's actually over a month ago already, or maybe it's a month ago today. Well, I don't even know what today's date is.
It's the 12th, you're
it's
right.
It's the 12th. It's a month ago today, okay. That's flown by. Look, I don't know who, if anybody, is going to run. The fact that there isn't a whole lot of people saying they want to do it, I take that as an accomplishment of our team. And I really don't feel like I'm in this alone. When I resigned from this building and resigned my 43-year career. When I went out there and said I'm going to run for mayor, I felt very alone. I didn't have a job. I'm going to do something I'd never done before. I'm going to be a candidate. At that time, there was already a couple of announced candidates. There was a lot of speculation. At one point, it got to 15. We no sooner announced in February, COVID hit in March. It was an endless odyssey of Zoom calls. It was such a surreal experience. And at that point, I was just trying to work our way through that and see if we could survive and win, and we did. And then to get sworn in the middle of a pandemic and all that that brought in the very first year was its own challenge. So, but all along, I felt that, if I could do this physically, that we would do it for the 8 years, because I just knew that the first terms would go by, and I got that orientation very quickly, becoming part of the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, when Mike Bloomberg told me most of the work he did happened in his third term, not even in his first two. And I'm thinking, that ain't going to happen here, even though they only had term limits in New York. So you have to look at that from that perspective. So for me personally, it's been more about maintaining physical stamina and the education and being able to play the role that I need to play as mayor, and in my leadership responsibilities with my team as a facilitator to help try to get the work done that we've talked about today. I haven't really thought about anybody outside, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not in this alone anymore. As I felt like that last time, I feel like it's our team. And I think that, I've had some really nice compliments paid to me in office, and from some people I never thought I would hear them from. And there was one that really surprised me and meant a lot, because it came from somebody that had been somewhat of a critic in the past. And he just simply said, Rick, it's really nice what your administration is accomplishing around town. We actually feel like we've got people in there that know what they're doing. And that's not a slam on anybody before us. It's just building that kind of confidence. And so just a few moments ago, I told you, it's kind of hard to, knowing that sometimes you have a voice that doesn't register, whether it's about fireworks or whatever else, or domestic violence, and at the same time knowing that you look at research that people still don't trust government, and you say, what more do you want, But I feel really confident that people feel like what we've got going on right now, and that's why Thursday night's really important.
Well,
because we want to set the tone for that.
Unfortunately, we do have to wrap things up here.
This is
we gave you an hour.
Wow.
Which was half an hour more than what we used to. So we thank you, Mayor, for coming on. And we look forward to hearing the state of the city happening on Thursday. Spotlight Now will be right back right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, it's great hearing from the mayor, really getting an update and a preview of what we can expect from his State of the City address, which is happening on Thursday. He was pretty tight-lipped about a lot of things, but definitely laid the foundation of what we can expect to hear.
Yeah, a lot on hiring, on the budget, Skyline, homelessness, and just his frustration with what's happened with some of those high-profile violent incidents, including what has happened in Manoa, really expressing his grief, not just as the mayor, but also just as a fellow citizen. So great to hear from him. Next week, we have the students from Kamehameha School's Maui campus taking over. They've put together a fantastic show. We cannot wait for you to see it.
Yeah, very special Spotlight Now next week, Tuesday, featuring some of the issues that are happening on the island of Maui. We leave you now with a beautiful shot of a crystal clear Honolulu skyline. Have a great rest of your day. Aloha.